cleaner because of them. What was the video store that was that green one? Well, good evening and welcome to Integrated Health 7 o'clock talk. And tonight we're going to talk about the structural integrity node, but we were just discussing Blockbuster, huh?
Yeah, I don't know what that one was.
And how basically Blockbuster lost its third of its thing because it basically how Blockbuster went out of business. And I guess the last Blockbuster in existence was in Bend, Oregon.
It's still there.
Is it still going?
Yeah, it's an icon. People actually travel there just to see it.
Huh. So
Bend, Oregon. If you want to go to Blockbusters, Bend, Oregon.
Bend, Oregon. Hi, Kath. Well, so we're going to talk about the structural integrity node, and I've been trying to wrap my head around how to actually discuss this and talk to this about to you guys to get you to understand this. The structural integrity talks about everything from skeletal integrity, which is what I do primarily as a chiropractor, and all the way down to the subcellular structure. And since this is a functional medicine talk, I'm going to do a couple minute blurb here on structural integrity for chiropractic, and then we're going to dig into the functional medicine. And so structural integrity for chiropractic, you should have a curve in your neck that is called a lordosis. And so if I look this way, it should go like that. And that same curve should be in your lower back. Those curves actually develop 12 weeks in utero. So if you're told that your curve is not good and you go to an MD that says, oh, hey, that's perfectly normal, it's not. It's common, but once again, it's not normal, because once those curves develop at 12 weeks in utero and they're supposed to be there. If they're not, then as we do functional tests in the clinic to move your head side to side and do that, and you move too far, well, if you are in an accident, you can damage the nerves, numbness and tingling from the hands, carpal tunnel-like issues. Those things can all occur. And around here, the big thing that hits people is back pain and sciatica. So it goes all the way down into the low back and radiates. Now, let's get into the functional medicine portion of this. And so I'm going to show some slides as to, I can't express the magnitude of how important structural integrity is, because it's the framework that everything fits on.
Well, if you don't have a backbone, then you're just a blob.
Well, not only that, but if your lipids aren't good in your fats, you don't make cholesterol. And if you don't make cholesterol, you don't make hormones. And if you don't make hormones, you don't feel right. If your cell health is low and you're not getting your vitamin A, D, E, and K, you can't reform the mucus layer in your stomach, and you're going to get leaky gut. If you don't have the structure of the gut, then you develop autoimmune diseases. I mean, this is so interwoven into how and who and what we are. So I thought for a long time and wondered how I was actually going to show this. And I decided on starting with showing you a cell. So this is a eukaryotic cell, and I don't know where this came from. I found it. It was done in the functional medicine thing. This is a microscopic electromicroscopy photograph with stain of a eukaryotic cell. This is not my picture. I am not taking credit for this.
But this is also not a model. This is an actual cell.
This is an actual cell, all the way down to the mighty mitochondria. But look at this, and look at everything that is in there. You got your Golgi apparatus, you got your nucleus, you got your mitochondria, you've got your DNA strand. I mean, it is so incredibly complex. And if we aren't eating good food, and it goes down to those 5 basic things. If you don't have good sleep, and you don't have good nutrition, and you don't have good exercise, and you don't practice stress relieving techniques, and you don't do things like have good company and friends, then these things all go awry. And just look at how amazing that is. I mean, to me, it is, because I used to think of a cell as just this blob that was empty. And there's not an inch of space here that's a vacuole. There's no air in there. It's all something. And I'm not smart enough to know what all of that is. If I find out if I remember and give credit to whoever did the cell, then I'll bring that back in. But let's start to pull back a little bit. So these cells are made of this, and this is the outside. So when you look at this cell, this is what you're looking at on that next slide, this outer membrane. It is a bilipid layer. You have to have 2 sets of fat. And this is what keeps water out. It's what keeps the cell from swelling and exploding. You can tell this is done by Thought Company. And it is absolutely amazing how this works. Something has to stick to this. A receptor has to come up, grab it, and then bring it in. So everything from insulin to anything but an LPS. So you've heard me talk about lipopolysaccharides. Why does this barrier not matter to a lipopolysaccharide? Because a lipopolysaccharide, which is a toxin, can hit this, and because it's a fat, it just slides right on through. And that's how it gets in. And so we're looking at that and saying that basically it gets through into the bloodstream. Here you're looking at bone. These are all cells as well. So you start to get lots and lots of those cells that are specialized, and then they start to make up the bone. So structure is very important, and you have to have the micronutrients to make the structure. This is why we're always talking about a good diet. If you're eating out of boxes and bags and barcodes, you are not getting the vitamins and nutrients and minerals that you need to rebuild these things. And it goes all the way from the micro to the macro. So when we look at structural integrity and we start to look at reactive arthritis, and so we're looking at stuff that is rheumatoid arthritis or psoriatic arthritis, any of these things, the intestinal permeability right here, it's important to know about that, because that intestinal permeability is what allows the autoimmune disease to start to happen. That is one of the 3 things that you have to have a problem with autoimmune diseases. And that's where this reactive arthritis, it's an autoimmune disease, and you have to have the intestinal permeability for that to happen. And if the structure of the intestine breaks down, then you can start to form those antibodies. When we look at the cardiometabolic diseases, when you increase BMI and your waist hip ratio goes up and your visceral adipose tissue goes up, this is very important. Why is that? Well, these are all related to increased visceral adipose tissue. And if you have increased body fat and increased visceral fat, those are their own cytokines. They create their own inflammatory markers. And so then you start to look at LPPL82, and this is a marker that tells you that you have plaques in the blood vessels. If you have increased fibrinogen, you have increased clotting factors. This is your calcium artery score and our carotid calcium score. And so if that increases, then you know that the blood vessel loses its integrity. And these are all parts of the structural node. And that's why that is so important. And this is carotid artery medial thickness, the intimal medial thickness. This is the actual thickness of the wall. And so you have to be careful about structural integrity because it's not usually a primary node, but it is an underlying node for all of the other nodes. So usually we'll see structural integrity of the lipids with communication, so with the hormones. And we'll see the structural integrity of the immune system breaking down when we have increased cytokines, so everything's out of balance. And like I said before, structural integrity goes everything from the subcellular membranes to the musculoskeletal structure. And it's one of those things that's so vast and so proliferative that it's hard to, I could talk on this for weeks, just this part. Once again, looking at the bones and the hormones. If you have that intestinal permeability, you are going to oxidize lipids. You're not going to make the hormones. So not only are we talking about your testosterone and your estrogen and stuff like that, but we don't make the hormones that help you decrease osteopenia. I mean, how important is, if you go read studies on estrogen and estradiol and its importance to bone health, you know, that's right there with it. So structural integrity has to do with all of these components. That's why especially nutrition is so important. And if you get a traumatic brain injury, this starts to change the blood-brain barrier. So then you can start to have intestinal permeability once again. And this all breaks down into fatigue. These things are things that cause you fatigue. And that's a structural note. I mean, it's, what questions do you have? I don't know how to go about that. I mean, hon, what do you think? What is there anything you can think of that? I mean, I just don't know how to impress upon people how important this is. And why is it important to make sure that you're eating whole foods and clean foods and not getting glyphosate in there, because glyphosate breaks down cellular structure. Toxins break down cellular structure. If you have a problem with any of the detoxification and stuff builds up, it's going to break you down from the inside out. And part of what it does is it breaks down your cellular health. So I guess I've been the doom and gloom guy today, but it's very important to know that stuff. What is glyphosate in? The better question, Susan, is what isn't it in? They've tested people that live in Maine, and Maine is supposed to be this really pristine area. There really aren't any factories or anything like that. 44% of the population had 44% of the population had glyphosate in their bloodstream, and they don't have factory farming there. So the big thing to think about in this case is think about people spraying their lawns. Think about weed control, 2,4-D. All of that stuff is kind of in the same vein. There is more glyphosate in Cheerios than there's more glyphosate in Cheerios than vitamin D, which we add to it. And how important is this? If you think about a hormone, we measure that in picograms. So that's like taking a dropper pulling up a drop of dye and dropping that into your pool. That's literally how sensitive the body is to hormones. And that's why these things are so important. And glyphosate is ubiquitous. It's throughout the food supply. Even your steel cut oats, your organic foods, which are not supposed to have any pesticides ever sprayed on them, they call it drift. And so if there's a field next to the field that is not organic, then you're going to have exposure to glyphosate. So it's very important to wash your foods. Environmental Working Group. This website has what is called the Dirty Dozen. And so if you go on there, they do the Dirty Dozen and they do the Clean 15.
Don't eat strawberries unless you buy them organic.
Yeah.
They're the worst.
Yeah. Strawberries are always
Number
up there.
one.
Apples are usually up there as well. So the thing that you just got to check it out and then wash your food. And when you wash your food, you need to do it with a spray that a food spray. I don't know how good the fit food spray is.
You can use if you don't have any of that, you can use organic vinegar. Put like a tablespoon into a bowl of water and soak them. I'm in the detox, which is not this portion, but I'm in the detox mode or node right now, studying for the certification test. And the first 2 hours of lecturing were just depressing on there's 2,000 new chemicals introduced into the environment every year. And they're what they call given GRAS status, generally recognized as safe until something goes wrong. And that's the way that we practice in America. So I would say that you need to get in there and really, really pay attention to what can change your lipids, what can change your hormones. And we're talking about the same old culprits around here, sugar, toxins, stress. That's the sad thing, is just being stressed out. It causes a change. So I hope that helps. And if you have questions about this, just let me know. But once again, we're down to that good sources of fat, good sources of protein, good sources of carbohydrates, lots of fiber. Don't cook with trans fats. They oxidize real quickly. Don't cook at high heat if you can avoid it. And that's the structural node. Libby's on a 12-hour fast. She's not happy.
Yeah, no, she's ready to eat us. So next week will be another node, and hopefully it'll be a little more upbeat than this because, like I said, this is not typically a primary node. This typically is one of those nodes that's underlying the nodes and pushing the changes and the problems. So you all have a wonderful evening, and we will see you next Thursday.